A new federal political party is emerging in Canada, aiming to recapture the political middle. The party says it has a message for those who feel politically homeless, and their interim leader is a current independent New Brunswick MLA and a former provincial cabinet minister. The interim leader for the Canadian Future Party, Dominic Cardy, joins me now. Mr. Cardy, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
So this party comes from Centre-Ice Canadians, and the founder of that organization, Rick Peterson, said last summer that the group was not interested in forming a party, and even said that setting up 338 riding associations will be worse than 338 root canals. So how did we go from root canals to setting up a brand new party?
That's an excellent question. And the answer to that is that we have found out there's something worse than having 338 root canals. And it's letting our politics continue to be dominated by people who are unable to present any sort of plans for our country's future and are mainly engaged in online clickbaiting to apparently try and drive us further and further apart in pursuit of building up support from their base. And that's certainly something we've seen from both the Liberal and Conservative parties recently. And it's at the detriment of serious policy work that needs to be done. What's our plan for actually dealing with climate change? Not pretending it's not real, as Mr. Poilievre likes to do, not saying it's just a question of taxing people. What are we actually going to do about it? Our proposal is simple. Let's get nuclear energy off the ground across this country in a big way, right away, because there is a climate crisis. We have the technology to fix it. We can sell that to other people, help them reduce their carbon emissions.
Right.
Other areas like defense, explicit commitment to getting to 2% of GDP on defense. It's one of our main policy planks. We need to get there as quickly as possible. When we have a policy process in the new party, I'm going to push for that level to be even higher, not just to protect our values, the rights to protect the rights of minority communities in Canada, but to protect those same values around the world, and to build up our defense industry in Canada so we can help be part of that defensive shield for democracies against increasingly hostile foreign actors like Russia and China, who have Chief of Defense Staff said last year in a testimony to the House, Russia and China believe they're at war with Canada. We're just a little bit slow, not having noticed it yet. We're looking at having a party that's ready to confront some of those challenges in an aggressive and realistic way, with evidence as the heart of our ideology, not some 19th century, 18th century idea of whether the government should run everything or the government should run nothing, which is sort of been the left-right division we've seen over the last couple of centuries.
Okay,
it doesn't work anymore.
There's
plans for the future.
There's a lot there for the first answer. I mean, clearly spelling out a direction on climate, another direction on defense. How do you build something like this and come up with a more robust policy plan beyond just those two areas with the time you have? Because I assume you want to run in the next election, right? So how do you get from here to there?
Well, we've been working on it over the last number of months, and we made that decision to switch again, like I said, because we saw that the other parties just weren't handling those challenges. No policies around how to handle AI, the huge challenges that brings to our society and our economy, social media companies and the algorithms that are all increasingly guiding most of our time online. No conversation about how that happened, whether or not it's damaging us. Pretty clearly is. I think that should be something government should work on. So we've got a policy process that's up and running, and we started it with the Centre-Ice project. We'll move that over to the new party website and invite people to contribute ideas based on a really quite difficult policy template. We don't want people to say, well, we should do X, we should do A and B. We should be coming up with policies that are basically sound bites. We need policies that show why the government should do something rather than the private sector or the voluntary sector. How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? What could go wrong? What's the consequence of not doing it? And only then say that should be something that evidence shows government should do. We've got to, again, move to an evidence-based rather than a clickbait-based approach to politics.
You talk about the fear and anxiety you say you're hearing from Canadians. I know your defense policy and your climate policy is spelled out, but how does this party address the fear and anxiety that Canadians are expressing at this point in time?
Well, I think that we've got to look at some issues around the cost of living crisis that is affecting people in the housing crisis. Those are all, in the end, interlinked, as they are linked to the healthcare crisis. Just quickly run through that. Unless we get immigrants in to help build houses, we don't have Canadians to do it. That's a conversation that the major parties are really avoiding, that we need to have immigrants come to our country in large numbers who can help build houses, not doctors and nurses who we then put to work driving taxis because we don't recognize their professional qualifications. Let's get the houses built, get skilled tradespeople in, train skilled tradespeople from the existing population and from new arrivals in our community colleges and other places, get those houses built. Then we'll be able to attract more high-level, highly trained immigrants to work as doctors and nurses and fill other valuable professional roles that, again, we don't have the population in Canada to fill our hospitals, to make sure they're properly staffed for when the baby boom generation really needs that care at the end of life, and we need a sustainable system going forward. So putting the pressure first on the federal government changing the immigration standards, also putting pressure on the medical societies to say that you need to create a clear, short pathway for foreign trained professionals when they arrive in Canada to get into operating rooms, to get in to hospital wards, to start helping Canadians, rather than us taking the best trained people from other countries and then squandering their talents and efforts by putting them to work in jobs that are not a good reflection of their qualifications.
So you're essentially saying you don't see serious options on either what we define as sort of the left and the right now in our political spectrum. And you come out of this group, Center Ice Canadians. This is the birth of all of this. You don't score a lot of goals from center ice, right? There's a reason politics has gone to one end or the other. How convinced are you there's an appetite for this? Because increasingly over the past few elections, it's about going after narrow slices on the edges to grow your vote, right? And this is why things have polarized in a big way. So what kind of an appetite do you think there is for a party like the one you're proposing?
So we had a poll in the springtime of several thousand Canadians and across the country done by a national polling firm. And we heard from Liberal and Conservative members and voters that they felt that their parties were becoming more extreme and less representative of their visions for the future of Canada and less representative of their values. So that was interesting that you see people who are current supporters of the major parties who really feel those parties are becoming more exclusionary, more extreme, really speaking less to people like them. So I think there is an appetite out there. We asked directly about what do people think about a new centrist party, and there was around a third of the population said they were ready to vote for it if it met a couple of criteria, and it was 13% said that they would vote for it regardless of who the leader was or anything else. They were so fed up with the status quo. Because I think it is that being fed up with this current system where you've got this old left-right dynamic, which doesn't reflect modern politics. When we talk about being centrist, we are not talking about being in the mushy middle. We're talking about being the sharp, pointy end of the arrow, trying to push things forward, push our country forward, push policies ahead. Because I mentioned earlier around climate change, we keep on talking about the climate crisis. That means we've got 10 years or so to fix it. Let's fix it. Let's use our nuclear energy to be able to help Canada and help the world on that file. So there's all kinds of areas where the existing parties, I think, have really dropped the ball because they have followed public sentiment and tried to follow the social media algorithms rather than actually talking about the real problems facing our country, which are huge and are going to be difficult and are going to require sacrifices from Canadians. So we're coming out with about the least sexy message you can, that we're going to need to work harder, we're going to have to sacrifice, and we're going to have to be realistic. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a fantastic country. And it makes me crazy when I hear Pierre Poilievre talking about Canada being broken. Canada is Canadians. That's it. No more, no less. And what we do with this fantastic country and the inheritance we have, the protection of rights, the natural resources, healthcare system, all of these things, even if they're creaky, that they're still there. It's on us as leaders to fix them, not to pass the buck to the World Economic Forum and blame some shadowy cabal of international outsiders, or as the Liberals tend to do, of just saying, well, we've been running this country for a long time. Why don't you just leave it to us? There's some reasons why the populist movements are asking so many questions. Some of those questions are valid about why our elites are not doing very well. It's just that the policy responses that they propose are dangerous and wrong in most cases, or poorly thought out at best. We aim to counter that with really hard-nosed, realistic, costed, timeline-linked policy.
Okay, I've got to jump in because we're out of time. I just need a very short, simple answer to this, Mr. Cardy. And not that I'm not enjoying the conversation, but I'm just up against it. You're the interim leader. Will you run for the permanent leadership? There's a lot of work to do, as you've just spelled out. Are you interested in actually leading this movement beyond this beginning stage?
So the next year, we're going to be hopefully moving up towards having our first leadership convention, full convention. And I will have a record to run on at that point. If other people feel I've done a good job, then possibly, but I've got a lot of work to do in the meantime. And I'll let that future campaign be defined by what this party looks like in a year's time. So that's my goal right now, is to build the country up from coast to coast to coast. Okay,
Dominic Cardy, the interim leader of the Canadian Future Party. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on the show. Great. Have a good night.